Alright everyone, some time ago a swastika was found in the snow at Syracuse University, and no joke, I almost went to Syracuse. I had narrowed it down between UVM, Castleton, and Syracuse at the time, because I had been accepted to all three. Probably should have gone with Castleton, I wouldn't be in a bunch of debt. Anyway, since then there have been a spat of other hate incidents on the campus at Syracuse, and the most recent one was apparently somebody was trying to airdrop onto people's phones. This is at least the allegation, a manifesto by a white supremacist. It turns out that this was a hoax. So, something that got everyone rattled, and there were people that were talking about, well, I went to Syracuse and this is terrible. It turns out that's not the case. This has been warned of multiple times before in other incidences. There was this famous case, it's 5 or 6 years ago, I think now, where there was this Jewish student and there were swastikas put on their door and everyone was all messed up and they're like, oh my god, Nazis are on campus. And then they checked the surveillance footage, they realized that the Jewish student had done it to their own door to get attention. This has happened more often than not. I would say more than half of these incidents, insofar as you're not dealing with incidents of violence, more than half of them at least seem to be hoaxes. And the reason is this. Let's say someone is a virulent, bitter bigot. Do they gain anything by scrawling a swastika across a Jewish cemetery door? No, not really. That would just be an act of vandalism. Well, sometimes people are dumb. They get high or drunk. They go out on a dare and vandalize things. The idea that there's a necessity that it be motivated by hate or be hateful in a primordial sense is clearly wrong. Most vandalism is just people tagging, scrawling some random shit, like saying fuck, ooh, and drawing a dick on somebody's on somebody's window or whatever. Sometimes they do it in shaving cream, which at least, washes off easily. That's less dangerous form of vandalism. Or toilet paper, a couple rainstorms later and it's dissolved into mush, basically. And then sometimes you get someone who puts racial slurs up or whatever. But it seems like disproportionately more often than not, it's not actually a white supremacist or a far-right extremist, so-called, or somebody like that doing it. It's somebody, it's a person who's drawing swastikas across campus. They're a Jew. It's a person that's leaving hate messages across campus and they turn out to be black and they're a member of some socialist movement or something. That's because there's something to be gained. Always look at who gains from an event. How is this any different from a Reichstag fire sort of thing? Oh yeah, the Reichstag is burning. A communist did it so that they would give us a cause to, go out and gas them all, essentially. No, that's clearly not what happened. It's funny also, hindsight is 2020. We always look at moral panics from years later, years or decades. And we always identify that they were weird. The claims were weird. They didn't really make logical sense. It wasn't reasonable. And you always have the same excuse, by the way, well, the group we're dealing with isn't reasonable. So today we have far-right extremists aren't rational. They're not reasonable people. They're deplorable. In a sense, it's an attempt to dehumanize them by the left. So obviously, if there's swastika graffiti, they're dumb enough to do it. No, there's no such thing as a hoax. This is the same exact logic that was used in the satanic panic, in the drug panic of the 60s, and in moral panics in times past. This particular time, in this particular place, this is modern times. This isn't the same as ancient times. Not to mention, the 2010s, 20 or 30 years from now, will be ancient times. We'll be older and we'll be looking back and people will say, oh, ha, things were primitive back then. And they'll make the same mistakes, by the way, because it's propaganda that causes these things. What's happening on the Syracuse campus is a microcosm of a greater moral panic in this country right now that says there's a big problem with far-right extremism or hate in a general sense, hate speech, hate crime, whatever you want to term it. There isn't. That is a lie. It's the same as the moral panic about guns right now. There are a lot of people in this country who think that we're in the midst of a gun crime epidemic. The gun crime epidemic was in the 80s. Gun crime in this country peaked in the late 1980s through the mid-1990s, has been dropping off fairly steadily since the introduction of public internet, which has increased people's ability to socialize, given them some degree of catharsis, I think, employment opportunities as well, and it's helped to gobble up a lot of societal problems. Since then, violent crime in this country on every metric, gun or otherwise, has dropped like a rock. But if you look at Kamala Harris's Twitter page, you wouldn't know that now, would you? If you look at the shit that's written by the New York Times or CNNs of the world, which will never retract their constantly inaccurate storytelling, it's a bunch of fairy tales, You would think that we're in the midst of a gun crime epidemic, that the economy is 1 second from collapse at any time, and that there are Nazis running around trying to lynch people, like a Jussie Smollett sort of story. But then, much like with the Jussie Smollett story, or most of these other notable examples, they turn out to be fake. They turn out to be hoaxes. They turn out to be bullshit. There is no Nazi involved. That's because they're extremely rare. You realize how rare actual violent skinheads in this country actually are in the United States or in Europe? Very, very rare indeed. They'd have you believe that there are millions of them just waiting to burst forth from the abyss and overrun our democracy and destroy liberal culture. It's not actually happening. No, what's happening is the only group endangering liberal culture are the groups that are pro-censorship, pro-war, pro-interventionism at every level. The left. The far left, which has become a mainstream force within, what used to be just liberalism. And they've spawned a bunch of socialists. They've spawned a bunch of self-proclaimed communists that want to censor and beat people down and punch people for some perceived societal ill. They are indeed the ones perpetuating violence most of the time. It's interesting when I see lies like, oh, Antifa never killed anyone. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Groups of mass people never got away with murder. Not even once. By the way, just ignore every other aspect of violence that they're involved in. I don't see groups of dudes with swastikas on doing that very often. The last time they tried to hold a rally at all, they got attacked by other groups of people, and it ended up becoming a national issue because Donald Trump praised liberal protesters that were off to the side, and his enemies decided to take that soundbite out of context. There's no rash of far-right attacks in this country. It's just not real. The only upswing in violence that you have is that people on the far left, I'm not talking about the average run-of-the-mill liberal or some garden variety Democrat, I'm talking about the fringe of the fringe. We're talking people who think that Bernie Sanders doesn't go far enough. There's a group of people in that boat, some millions of them in the US alone, that are fanatics. They have been primed towards violence because it's not their own fault. They've been lied to by the legacy media and legacy politicians seeking to use them as pawns to think that there's an army of Nazis. And if there is no army of Nazis, you just pretend that there is one and tell these people that there is. And these people then say, well, we're under attack. Oh my God, our freedoms and liberties are at bay. They're going to lynch gay people and kill all the Jews and gays. So we've got to arm up and prepare for battle. And so they don't see anything wrong with punching someone with a MAGA hat on. They've been told that that's a Nazi. And it's okay because, that person's hateful and extreme and violent. But where's the violence actually coming from? It's not coming from the MAGA hat wearer. And so the cycle perpetuates itself. At some point, you naturally have a response, which is that you will have an actual far right starting to organize. It won't just be some Proud Boys escorting Milo Yiannopoulos to a speaking event to keep him from getting lynched along the way by communists. It'll be something more substantial than that. It's just going to happen. It's a natural response. It's just a bunch of bullshit. So what's happening at Syracuse is a microcosm of the bullshit that's happening on a national stage. There's no upswing in extremism. The idea, oh my God, there's a swastika in the snow. The world has ended. Have you ever used a public restroom? Like you've never fucking seen swastikas scrawled across the restroom wall before. Bullshit. You see them everywhere. It's constantly within graffiti. Most of these people have nothing to do with the white supremacy. They're trying to piss other people off. It's the same reason they draw crudely drawn dicks on the bathroom wall. The fact that they draw dicks doesn't mean they're misogynistic and want to rape women. It just means they're being dicks at the time. It just happens. There's one kid I knew in high school, not naming names, he used to have a thing he would draw all over his folders. He would have a Star of David with a swastika in the middle and say Nazi Jew, and he thought this was hilarious. He was also a liberal stoner. He's not a Nazi under any circumstances. I mean, come on, dude. Live a little bit. Yeah, what, you weren't around in the 2000s? Like, you weren't around in those edgy times? Dude, things were a million times more edgy back around maybe 2005 to 2010 than they are now. There was no sanitation of the mainline internet sites. YouTube was a hell pit of nonstop trolling. There was Nazi shit everywhere. Somehow nobody was radicalized. They just thought it was funny because it was irreverent and blasphemous and heretical and considered bad and wrong by society. It was something to piss your parents off with, your boomer parents. That's funny. That's haha, it's comedy. It's satire of a sick culture. But doesn't mean there's an army of Nazis around. The idea, it's hilarious that this manifesto that got people so pissed. People were fleeing the campus. Oh my God, people are leaving campus because they're not doing enough about hate on campus. There was no manifesto. It was a bunch of bullshit. It was a false claim. It never actually happened. It was a hoax. Again, even the hoaxing is largely designed to get people's goat. Yeah, so fuck the Syracuse University officials there that are promulgating this mythology that there's a bunch of Nazis running around their campus. Are you nuts? So in other words, the average person, they're like a skinhead, trailer-dwelling meth head. They're capable of getting the grades necessary to go to Syracuse. I'm glad. That'll make people who have graduated from Syracuse sound very, very smart indeed. That's about all. Peace out.